made a great contribution today when he did a sort of timeline in the history of man, in the evolution of man on Earth. Maybe I'm a little bit mystical, but when I die, for instance, what will happen? Will this be the true end? I am an 80-year-old man talking to you. Does it make sense? I'm so near the grave rather than the cradle. Why am I here? It's very difficult for a layman to see or distinguish if a man is sleeping or if a man is dead. But he can really make that distinction because he's a spiritual being and he can see it. Ashes to ashes, says Genesis, the Bible. But we have a feeling, an intuition, a perception connected with the fact that those bonds between man and religion have virtually vanished in the modern age. There are remnants of an old-time religion, typical of the 1800s, 1900s, or the 20th century. But this wasn't so in the history of mankind. Man has always thought that he was in connection with gods, with transcendental spiritualism. And this has to do with the fact that today we have a lot of problems, and we are going to have problems in the future if we don't take into account of these issues. If today Guillermo Andreu spoke ill about the Roman law, he's right. But if the Roman law is still effective today, it's not only because of selfishness. The Roman law embodied a very important notion, the peculiarity of the individual being entitled to certain rights. And this is indelible. This is very important. It was a factor which became of the essence in the evolution of man. After the Middle Ages, we entered into the modern age, the individualism age, as we call it, and individualism was praised, and many people think that we should live like Robinson Crusoe, absolutely on our own. As from the French Revolution, this scenario would create a reaction vis-à-vis the society, because, of course, there was a new being, so to speak. The society is very important as such. Society is a new sort of organism of being. It's very easy to be independent when you are absolutely alone, but when you have another human being right to you, we have society. But society is different from mass organization. I mean, this society that has besieged by individualism, growing individualism in all spheres of lives, whether you call it market economy or capitalist economy, though this is not the right term, or science independent of religion, you can see in the dwindling of religion as dogmatic practices, churches are losing churchgoers, so to speak. So excessive individualism, where we are now embarked on, is driving us to an even ever-increasing individualism. Individualism is growing, increasing. In the times of the French Revolution, libertarians and socialists thinkers and viewers were the two main currents or streams of thought, and they were the origin of totalitarian regimes, authoritarian regimes. We are looking for more individualism, more liberty and freedom, and we, of course, admit that we have a society in place which is a matrix for us human beings to live under these societal rules. And in this scope, under this scope, as Guillermo Andreu mentioned, we have seen the evolution of law. We stemmed from divine law. In the times of Rome and Greece, gods play a major role in the lives of men. Hebrews, think about Jews, Ten Commandments, that's the law. Christianity, one single principle, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So, as you can see, all the commandments have been reducing. 10 commandments were reduced into one single commandment. And this was called divine law. In the Middle Ages, St. Thomas Aquinas said, it's divine law, but we have cataracts affecting the right sight. We cannot see because our eyes are defective, and we are going to call it natural law. In the 1800s, along the lines of this individualistic evolution, natural law gives place to rational law. French Revolution enshrined a goddess, the goddess of reason. At the same time, and on a contemporaneous basis, as a result of the dissolution of the Roman Empire, the emergence of slums, shanty towns, new communities and villages, we can see the stumbling blocks that we have seen in the 1600s with Spain, 1689 England, later on Germany in 1869. We have seen a new organism, so to speak, nation states. And nation states, in the times of the French Code, 1804 Napoleonic Code, there was a marriage, a wonderful marriage at that time between natural law and written law, so to speak, or statute law, the French Civil Code. The French Civil Code is natural law codified in written paper by an act performed by whom? By Napoleon. And who was Napoleon? The governor of the new French state. So we have the inheritance of divine law from God to the Pope, and then to the Pope to an intermediary, the lawmaker. So the lawmaking state is going to say what law is. I mean, there's a minor change, but we have opened the doors of hell. And we have a new theology in place today. Today, all over the world, God, as Friedrich Nietzsche has said, has disappeared from his throne, and we have put in his stead or place the state. Who are the popes? Who are the intermediaries or middlemen with God? Governments. And as it happens with the history of papacy, there were good, bad, mediocre popes. Now, the government is not the representative of the people. It is the representative of the state. And citizens have become churchgoers, and they are divided, according to their metaphysical or religious beliefs, divided into different political groups. This is an evolution that we must take into account. I am a professor of law. This is not criticism for my friend. And When you use the word law, derecho in Spanish, because law is also ley in Spanish, is connected with taxation, with the ticket that you are going to pay when you were over speeding. This has nothing to do with divine law or natural law. This is positive law. Positive. Positive means that it has been put by some specific power lying in a specific organization, the state.
Acá hay muchos.
For practical men, and there are many attorneys here present like Barcesat, who is a fighter for human rights, I'm certain that in his defense for human rights, I doubt he will invoke God as the source of all reason and justice. He may say justice shall be done, but what has to indicate is factual things. There is a breach of this or that article. Who will bring a suit invoking the Bible or the Torah or the Quran? What rules today is positive law that has been put in place by the will of men. It so happens, therefore, that the law has each and every feature of an act of force. It may be mildly coactive. It may be persuasion. It may simply amount to being coercive. And it may be even violent, because the one whose car has been towed or those who are in prison, don't you think they are there because of repentance or repentance? They are there because they are in jail, behind the bars. That is, the force of positive law is the backbone of the current legislation. The problem lies in knowing where that force is heading. Is it heading for good or for evil? Because it may go both ways. Nuremberg was not a traffic accident. And Eichmann, who was brought to court in Israel, never thought he was not discharging his duties. He was abiding by the law. But what law is that? It's the Führer principle. That's the point we have got to. The voice of the master becomes the law. And at the same time, we are swaying flags in favor of democracy, flags that speak of equality. We have lost our sense of direction. We have the force to bring a positive law into existence. We have fortunately gone for the democratic approach. Let's discuss among all of us, as in the old and ancient Israeli tribes. But back then, they would get together every 50 years, and there was one date, the purpose of which has been forgotten, which was the Jubilee. Surely many of you know, but just in case, let me remind you. The Jubilee was this. 50 years later, property or ownership over land finished, and they had to distribute land again, but because in 50 years there were no children, new generations, new young people, and the land was in the hands of those to whom it had been allocated. The Moses law in the Levitic provides that law will be redistributed every 50 years. Was it enforced? Mind you, we are human beings, of course not, but it so